Oh my god. An actual tanky in the flesh. Communism, he says, turned Russia and China into superpowers and raised millions from poverty. Let's examine the record of the Soviet Union. Millions imprisoned in gulags for their political beliefs, because they belonged to the wrong political party, because they prayed at home with their family. Secret police would come in the middle of the night and they would lock you up and you would just disappear from society. The vast majority of people imprisoned in these gulags were political prisoners who had committed no real crime except they believed the wrong thing or they said the wrong thing or somebody informed on them. I can't believe that this guy is championing the Soviet Union or Maoist China when, first of all, even throughout the totality of the Soviet Union, everybody was dirt poor. Conditions were absolutely miserable. Sure, they had a bunch of tanks, and the state spent a lot of money, wealth that was taken from the people and spent by the state to aggrandize the Politburo officials. Sure, the high-ranking party members had a very nice lifestyle, but the vast majority of the Russian population was desperately poor. They had very little in the way of consumer goods. It was very difficult to find an apartment in Moscow, and even if you could find one, it was very mediocre. Often you're sharing it with another family, and Russia was one of the first nations to have universal health care, but the conditions in their hospital were just abysmal. Very poor sanitation, no anesthetics, no antibiotics, very little medicine. I mean, it was just a horror show, much in the same way as Cuban hospitals are. Not the ones that Michael Moore or paying Western guests use or party officials use, but the hospitals for your average person. Very disturbing if you see the pictures. People have to bring stuff from home. You have to bring sheets from home. You have to bring soap from home, or you won't have it. So, Russia and China raised millions from poverty. Well, technically, they probably did, just because the population is so large. There was probably, 2 million party officials that were living lives of luxury. I don't know exactly how many party officials there were. That sounds about right, though. If you have a population of whatever 150 million, 2% in the political elite, that's certainly a small fraction of the population. But no. Communism was the Soviet Union. That is not. Why would you support that? And China, Mao, under Mao and under Stalin, by the way, there were mass famines in the Ukraine. In Ukraine, it's called the Holodomor, something like that. Millions of Ukrainians starved to death because the Russian officials collectivized the farms, and then they confiscated the seed, and they were exporting bread while everyone was starving to death. Millions died in unnecessary famines, and tens of millions have died under Maoist The so-called, quote, Great Leap Forward, which was not a great leap forward. Uh, they had mass starvation because what Mao did was he encouraged all the workers to melt down their hose and start smelting iron in the backyard. It sounds ridiculous. That's really what happened. Because he wanted to industrialize, and he thought, well, we'll just, everybody's going to become a smith. And of course, these peasants were pretty good at growing food, but they didn't know much about smelting iron. And it ended up just destroying everything. So the only reason why China has become more prosperous in recent times, and still, I mean, on a per capita basis, they're quite poor, and the poor in China are extremely poor, it's quite stratified in that sense. But the only reason why China has become much more prosperous in recent years is because they abandoned communism, because they adopted capitalism. They went from 100% state-owned enterprises to 90% private sector ownership of the means of production. And yes, capitalism was successful in China, just like it's been successful in every country it's ever been attempted. That is not an argument for communism. That is proof that communism doesn't work. I mean, what kind of tanky clown is this? Saying these awful, terrible things.
Going away and dying because clearly I must know nothing because she just called me retarded.
Yeah, you are retarded if you are in favor of the Soviet Union and Maoist China. If you're a tanky communist.
So, I've continued, and now all the libertarians are coming at me on social media, right? And they all insist I know nothing about communism. And I want to show you another highlight. This was a great one. So I thought this was just some random dude bro account. I didn't realize who this was. So, a bunch of people are tweeting at me. One of the people that tweets at me is some guy named Joshua. And I guess he's a libertarian candidate for president. But I figure there's a lot. I mean, it's a third party, right? So he says, you never say the USSR and such wasn't real communism, because you'd be one of the first communists in history. So basically, he accused me of saying that the USSR was not real communism, not real socialism, which is something I...
No, he didn't. He expressed surprise that you're actually defending the USSR, because most communists disavow the USSR because it was a brutal totalitarian regime. That a hellish nightmare that nobody wants to live under. That's why there's a question mark at that end of the sentence. He's not ascribing that view to you. He's expressing surprise that you have that view. I mean, are you being disingenuous, or you just lack basic literacy skills?
I do not say, right? Maybe woke Trotskyite college campus Bernie Sanders kids say that. I don't say that. Anyone who's all familiar with any of the books I've written, any of the classes I've given, and all of that, I don't denounce existing socialism. I uphold
You should.
its achievements. I'm critical of its failures, etc. And when he accused me of saying that, I said, well, I don't say.
Again, he didn't accuse you. Learn how to read.
Hey, the USSR was not real socialism. And he said, you never say that because you're one of the first communists to be honest. And I said, there's plenty of communists who defend really existing socialism. There's plenty. I mean, the Communist Party of the United States.
There are some, but no, most socialists that I've talked to certainly are more along the lines of, no, we want, libertarian socialism. We want worker control of the means of production, not state control of the means of production. To be fair, he's right. There are some tankies out there. I mean, it's you got to give him credit for defending such an unbelievably impossible position to defend. I mean, this is a lover of lost causes, once they are truly lost, I'll
States, the communist parties of the world, that we're part of the Communist International and we're aligned. But apparently all communists are woke kids with pink hair who say, well, that's not real socialism. I don't say that. But, so I pointed out that actually there's plenty of communists in the world who do actually defend real socialism. And, he wasn't going to have that. So let me show you where it went next.
Oh boy, I can't wait.
It went next to...
Oh, I love the bookshelf, by the way, in the background. Oh, you're such a fucking intellectual, buddy.
It went next to, right? Here we go.
Looks like they need to redistribute some internet speed to you.
I know more than you. I have read more communist literature.
Okay. Joshua Smith coming across as a bit of an idiot here. I mean, that's par for the course for libertarian presidential candidates. This guy's a bit of a joke too. From what I've seen of him, which isn't much.
Richer than you.
Even the retarded college kid. Hey, it's Elon Musk bought Twitter. You're allowed to slur and say retarded. This isn't Reddit, all right? You can go wild. You can use the hard R, retard.
You are just a run-of-the-mill retarded college kid who thinks communism is cool. Now,
This is just a bad argument from Joshua Smith. I know more than you. I mean, prove it, right? I've read more communist literature than you. I'm not even sure that's worth bragging about. Like,
I'm 35 years old. I haven't been in college since 2010, but what do I know, right? I'm just a college kid, right? Because everyone who believes in communism is a college kid, and he's apparently read more literature than I have. So I actually thought it would be a great idea for Joshua to come on the stream. But he said he can't come on the stream because he has children.
That's pretty weak. If you're gonna talk shit on Twitter and then not back it up with a debate, because he has children, what possible relevance could that have?
And I
Like he doesn't want to get doxxed by commies or something? That's a pretty weak excuse for dodging debate, Joshua. Come on, bro.
said, well, why don't you just go in the other room and come on the stream?
I mean, I have a kid, and I'm still here, live streaming or whatever, making YouTube content.
And then he proceeded to brag about how he has children, and proceeded to explain to me his, about how he's amazing because he's had children, essentially, bragging about his sperm.
Hey, procreating is the whole purpose behind life, right? That's the culmination of billions of years of evolution.
Count. This is what we're dealing with libertarians. So I thought that it would be good to just open.
Hey, come on, there's idiots in all ideological spectrums.
This up, and if any libertarian wants to come on here and explain to me what communism is, because apparently I don't know anything about it, right? I mean, I've only been to communist countries. I'm only the leader of a communist organization. I've only been at global communist gatherings. I've only, I've only,
And Caleb going right back down to Joshua's level.
Studied the writings of Deng Xiaoping. I've only been to, countries and global communism. I don't know anything about it. These libertarians, they know everything there is to know about communism. I know nothing. So I thought I would just bring a couple libertarians on, and it's open, right? The link is in the chat. The link is in the chat, and you can come on, and you don't have to be a libertarian. I know if you're a fan of the show or you're just somebody else who wants to just come on and talk, but I'll just bring them on. Anybody who wants to come on is I'll bring you on. Couple ground rules. One,
bring them on already.
I have to be able to see your face. If I can't see your face, I'm not bringing you on, right? You're seeing my face. This is my face. This is not a mask. And because of that, you have to show your face. That's rule number.
That seems like kind of a dumb ground rule. I mean, how does it change the arguments being made?
Number one. Rule number two is I can boot you out at any time. I can boot you out at any time. And if this turns into some childish insult fest or whatever, I'll kick you out of here. I want to have a substantial conversation. And it will start with me just asking you to explain what communism is. And we'll go from there. But, if this turns into
So we're gonna have a debate, and I'm gonna have all the control. I'm going to ban you at any time if I want to, because I'm a communist authoritarian.
Childish insults. The kick from stream button is right here, and it's very, very easy to use. So don't think that you can.
What do you think the over under is on how many Reddit subreddits this guy mods?
Come on here and act a fool, because it'll end like that. So I guess we got two people. I can see their faces now. There's someone named Samuel. I can see his face. And there's Nick. I can see Nick's face. So Nick was first. I'm going to bring Nick on. And like I said, feel free.
All right, Nick, do us proud.
Feel free to come on, to come on. Like I said, there will be, I'll boot you out of here if you get too wild. And the link is down below. The link is over in the chat. Let me see if I can put the link one more time before I bring him on, just so that other
Solzhenitsyn, straight to the gulag.
People who come on can have it. I want to have the link on the stream, and then we'll bring Nick on to explain communism to me.
Come on, Nick.
So there we go. And like I said, well, there we go. So join the stream.
Well, we're waiting for Caleb to figure out how to bring Nick on. Let's just thank the wonderful modern capitalist technology that makes live streaming possible.
Explain.
If this was the Soviet Union, we'd still all be on ICQ chat.
Communism.
Although, to be fair, they did invent Tetris. What is this guy? He's got to be American, right?
Okay.
Because from his accent.
All right. So now we got the link.
Definitely American.
And that is, anyone else wants to hop on, get in line. There's 3 people ahead of you, but really only 2, because I can't see Ryan's face. And so until Ryan reveals his face, he's not.
Uh-oh, Ryan, that's a no-no. Got to see the face.
Not coming on. All right.
I got to look a man in the eyes when I tell him about the glory of our Lord and Savior Karl Marx.
Nick, how are you? How are you tonight?
Nick is not looking good.
Nick.
I'm doing all right, thanks. I'm excited to be on.
Are you?
On the show. I'm just recovered from
Nick looks like your typical libertarian.
COVID, so I just got to warn you guys, be careful. It's out there. It's circulating.
Don't worry, bro. I'm triple masked.
It's real. It put me in bed for a week, but now on the
Okay. Chill.
tail end of it, I've got the energy to move mountains.
Okay. Explain communism to me, Nick.
Okay, that's not how you have a conversation with somebody. Like, explain communism.
What do I know about
to
communism?
me.
I started studying a little bit of Marx in political science class. Well, supposedly, we're supposed to pool our resources together, right? And work together and share them as equitably as possibly, right?
From each according to their ability, to each according to their means. As my boy K. Marx once said.
No, actually.
Oh, no.
No.
No,
I have my own special version of communism. You're an idiot for not knowing exactly what it is.
I'm just, where does that come from?
From each to their need, from each of their capabilities to each to their need. What is that saying? How does that saying go?
Well, that
From each according to their ability, to each according to their needs.
That quote, I've got that right here, actually, and we'll show you what that quote, from each according to their own ability, to each according to their need.
Okay, you had to look that up, bud. What sort of fake communist doesn't know that right off the top of my head? I think this guy's a government plant too. They're both government shills, clearly.
Put that on the screen here. Hold on.
Oh,
I'll show you where that actually comes from.
On the screen.
That's from the Critique of the Goethe Program. which is a pamphlet that Karl Marx wrote, and he's explaining, I guess I have to take this off the screen so you can see.
Karl Marx, an influential communist.
He's explaining that in a socialist society like the Soviet Union, Cuba, Venezuela, etc., you're going to have a whole lot of inequality. You're going to have a whole lot of all of these things.
Okay, let's just read this together silently. Okay.
He says these defects are inevitable in the first phase of communist society, as it is just emerged from the prolonged birth pangs of capitalist society.
This is the so-called raw communism, a horrific vision.
Then he goes on, in a higher phase of communist society, after the enslaving subordination of the individual to division of labor, and therewith the antithesis between mental and physical labor has vanished. After labor has become not only a means of life, but life's prime want. And after the productive forces have increased with the all-around development of the individual and the springs of...
So, Nick was right.
...cooperative wealth flow more abundantly, only then can the narrow horizon of bourgeois right be crossed in its entirety and society inscribe on its banners, from each according to his own ability and to each according to his needs.
Ergo, in communism, the higher stage of communism, basically the real communism that everybody's aiming for, you would get, as Nick said, you would get what you needed and you would give what you had to give.
And what that means is that you cannot have a society where there's equality until you raise the level of productive forces massively, right? You cannot...
I don't think that's what that says. Well, maybe
build equality and poverty, right? That's what he's saying. And that in the first stage of communism, there's going to be vast inequality. But that inequality or that problem can be overcome.
Okay, but you're just ranting now. How is what Nick said wrong? It isn't, unless you're talking about raw communism, which wouldn't really make sense. You're talking about communism, the ideal society you're trying to achieve, not this first stage, which is just like a very chaotic and horrible transition between capitalism and communism.
By the fact that we can increase productivity in society.
This is basically just Gish Gallop. He's interjecting all this Marxist theory that has nothing to do with what Nick said, and nothing to do with the issue at hand. But there's just so much there because, obviously it's densely packed theory. It's just overwhelming. But you're not backing up your claim, your attack on Nick at all. You're not defending it. It's just Gish Gallop.
You have to get rid of scarcity. You have to get to a post-scarcity society.
Okay, you can't. That's impossible. How are you going to get rid of scarcity? That's impossible.
And when you get to such a post-scarcity society, when people...
How you get there, bud? Show us the way.
...only have to work because they feel like it.
Like, you know what a post-scarcity society would mean? Like, if I wanted 10 cheeseburgers, I could just clap my fingers and they'd appear magically. Like, you would literally... Everyone would need to have magic powers or those replicators from Star Trek. Like this is not feasible. Certainly not feasible with any of the technology we have today. Maybe in 1,000 years. Even then, I mean, even technically, even Star Trek's not a post-scarcity society because it's all run on those dilithium crystals. So there is a scarcity of dilithium crystals.
People only.
Although it's effectively post-scarcity, at least for what we're thinking of human needs.
When people basically work to not be bored, when labor becomes life's prime want, meaning people do it to not be bored, they don't have to. When there's no division between mental and physical labor, and there's so...
I mean, it's an idiotic utopian vision of a society that could never exist. When nobody has to work and we're all just playing and You know, oh, I'm going to have a garden now, and that'll be fun. I'm going to go pretend to be a doctor. Oh, shit, he died again. Well, what can you do, you know? uh, should have gone to med school. Should have had a division of labor society.
So much the springs of cooperative wealth flow more abundantly. Then at that point, people can just take what they want and do what they
This guy's a preacher. He's not a polemicist.
feel like doing. But as he says at the beginning, that's not the way it is until we get to that ultimate goal of a world without scarcity. That's where.
So now he's making an argument, I guess, that because raw communism isn't like that, that's not what communism is. But again, when you're talking about what is communism, you're talking about what is the end result, not as what is this hellish transition phase.
Where that quote comes from. And actually, according to his needs,
oh my God, just Caleb just completely monopolizing the conversation, which I guess is to be expected. I mean, but this is just such a lame exchange.
That comes from the Bible. That comes from the book of Acts, because the disciples, they distributed wealth according to need, according to the book of Acts, verse.
Are you just gonna fucking talk for like 3 hours, buddy?
Verse 432. And so that's actually Marx was making a biblical.
And note how Nick was nothing but polite and cordial. I guess Caleb's got an axe to grind against Jacob or some Twitter libertarians. He's just taking it out on this poor. Looks like he's cancer survivor Nick Nunnally here. Obviously, probably just smoked like a couple fat J's, and he's like, "Oh man, this is a lot to process. This guy's just throwing words around like crazy."
Illusion. So that's where that quote comes from. So
cool. Yeah. That's very fascinating. Thank you. So with 1% of our workforce able to generate all of our food needs in America, and very few more percent able to generate the manufacturing needs. Have we reached that point yet, do you think?
Ooh, a very nice question.
Of the super productive individual?
I think we're close.
You think we're close? Are you retarded?
But the problem is, under capitalism.
Yeah, we're close, buddy. We're close to having the totality of the manufacturing. Well, actually, manufacturing is only like 10% of the economy, so theoretically, it's only like 10% of the population. So maybe 2 or 3% is not super far off. But then that's also taking into account massive imports from countries that have much higher levels of manufacturing. Probably much, much higher because they're more labor intensive. Places like China and other low-income countries where you have that cheap labor. I'm not. That's just speculation on my part. I'm not basing that off any figures or anything that I know of. Just makes sense.
The only way you can survive is by selling your labor power to a boss, renting yourself out, and the more productive
labor power. I like the way that sounds.
Labor becomes, the fewer people get hired. And that's why in this system we have a problem that no other system in history has ever had, of people being homeless because there are too many houses, of people being hungry.
Well, I don't think people are homeless because there are too many houses. They're homeless because they're drug addicts, mentally unwell, or they just can't afford the high rents because flop houses are criminalized. There's no long-term tendency towards unemployment. Marxists have this view that there's a long-term decrease in return on capital, which is also untrue.
Hungry because there is too much food, right?
No, that's not how that works.
Problem of overproduction where the worker cannot buy back what.
Say's law. There is no such thing as a general glut of overproduction because supply of A constitutes demand for B. It's not possible because what happens in the market economy is you're trading production for production. And this is something that the mainstream media and I would say most establishment economists get wrong. They're focused on consumption, on consumer spending, and all that jazz. But really, what's going on in the economy is you're trading production for production, um, and then you have sort of the parasite class. But that's another story. Um, so the more that is produced, the more that can be purchased. There's no such thing as a glut of an overall glut of overproduction. You can have overproduction of a specific good, in which case the price will drop, and things will balance out. That's the beauty of the market economy. But a general glut of overproduction.
What he produces, self-driving
no,
cars, would be a
Hey, sorry, just gotta. Yeah.
great thing in a rational society. But in this society, self-driving cars would lead to riots in the streets. As Andrew Yang, the forward reporter, I read The War on Normal People. It's a great book. And he talks about how self-driving cars is hanging over the U.S. economy as a curse. That's not rational. Self-driving cars would lead to this chore called driving being unnecessary. Right?
I can't wait for the day where I can start the party in the car on the way.
We know you already started the party like 2 hours ago, Nick.
Well, right. And the idea, right, that Marx talks about is this problem of labor being replaced by technology, leading to greater poverty, and the market being glutted with products that can't be sold needs to be resolved by having central rational planning of the economy.
No. Well, I mean, first of all, you already have planning of the economy with the price system. It's that the economy is planned by consumers. They determine how much is produced based on their consumption patterns. But no, there's no general glut of overproduction. Stop saying that. It's incorrect. I mean, all a greater supply of goods does is bring prices down. The horrors. People have a better standard of living. Oh my God, what will we do?
That's what he's talking about, right? And that's the first stage, which is socialism, which is what they have in China and Vietnam and places like that.
We have centralized planning of our economy too.
Okay, first of all, no. China, Vietnam, these countries have stock markets. They are not socialist. They are capitalist, primarily capitalist economies with maybe not democratic political structures. Maybe they are democratic within a one-party system. I'm not really going to comment on that.
To a degree, there's encouragement.
Democracy is a bit of a joke anyway. I mean, all it does is legitimize the criminal state.
Encouragement by the central U.S.
Good point, Nick. Good point. A lot of central planning going on in the West.
Forces. We're talking about onshoring a lot of manufacturing through whatever means the government has. So. I lost my train of thought there.
That's okay, but
the train of thought has been derailed. He wasn't listening anyway.
But I mean, the idea is to generate abundance, right? To raise the living standard.
Oh, so socialism's been good at that, has it?
And that's why this woke left, when they talk about degrowth, I don't know where they're getting that. I just showed you the quote.
Okay. Point for Caleb.
From Marx about how communism is only possible, the full higher stage of communism is only possible with vast abundance. So when these people talk about degrowth, I mean, I don't know what they're talking about, right? The idea is to get to a situation where poverty is not created by abundance. People don't get poorer because more wealth is created.
I mean, that's already the situation. The economy is not a pie that's divided. Wealth is created. If a group of people go off and create some wealth, that doesn't leave anybody else any worse off. I guess the counter to that would be, if you're taking land that they could have used, something like that. But realistically, I mean, most people are just sitting in an apartment or whatever anyway in the modern society. not like we're going off and building homesteads or whatever. Though that would be pretty sick.
So then the level of wealth in society can vastly expand, and we can get to this kind of ideal world where people just take what
We're already there, man. I mean, we're already freaking there. The amount of wealth is expanding rapidly every year, and to the degree it's not happening fast enough, it's because we have the welfare state. We have all these socialist policies or welfarist policies which were advocated by socialists, like high government spending, like social security, like unemployment insurance, all these government programs, and all this consumption spending by the government that takes away from capital accumulation, which is the real driver of growth of the economy and of wages for workers.
what they need and do what they feel like doing. That's kind of the idea.
Yes, that is a utopian communism. That's that post-capitalism society, right? Where
utopianism is something Marx argued against, right? Utopianism was the idea that you could just create it with your mind.
Oh yeah, no, there's nothing utopian about a post-scarcity society where we're all just playing Minecraft all day and somehow the machinery of industry produces unheard of abundance and cheeseburgers for all. There's nothing utopian about Marx's vision of communism at all. No. Why would you say that?
Mind, right? The people just come together and be good and share everything. There were a lot of people who did that in Marx's time. And, in America, there was like New Harmony, and there was all kinds of communes and all that. And Marx said, that's not rational. Socialism is not going to be created by our minds. It's going to be created.
The ranters, the diggers, Plymouth Rock.
By society moving ahead, just like capitalism came out of feudalism. Capitalism was a great advance over feudalism, right? And feudalism was a great advance over slavery, and slavery was a great advance over hunter-gatherer civilization.
I mean, if feudalism came out of slavery, I thought it came out of monarchy. I mean, slavery was still around during feudalism.
And human beings were constantly reinventing our relationship with Mother Nature, being more efficient, advancing greater technology. And when we have a huge leap in our advances, it comes with a new social system, right? That's the idea. That's what Marx was getting at there. And that we will eventually get to a world where scarcity is abolished and the need for a government goes away, and that we can kind of get to an ideal world. But in order to do that, you have to overcome scarcity. The basis of it is getting rid of scarcity. You have to.
And before we can have this moneyless, classless society, we need a communist dictatorship to have total control over our lives and the economy.
Great abundance. And that's why the leader of China, Deng Xiaoping, he said, poverty is not socialism, but to be rich is glorious, which is the same thing that Marx said in that quote I just showed you there, right? You can't have communism on the basis of poverty.
Yeah, Deng Xiaoping, very loyal follower. So would like a UBI something, and it's just so funny because at the end state of communism is the dissolution of the authority of the state, and that's exactly what libertarians, anarcho-libertarians are after. And so I think at some point the horseshoe maybe kisses at the end there. Is a good first step something like a universal basic income? I think that to me would be a great first step.
No. That's a very bad first step. And the problem is with the UBI is the taxes to pay for it would be so high, especially if it was added on to all the government spending instead of a replacement for. But either way, if the amount is any sort of meaningful amount, and to a degree, actually, we do have not a UBI, but a BI, a basic income, in Canada, like a patchwork of payments. So you've got like GST rebates, and now there's the carbon tax rebate, and there's provincial rebates as well. You get cash money, if you're a low income individual, it could be anywhere from a few $1,000s a month, and then if you have children, it could be, substantial, like like up to $10,000 or $15,000 a year in direct transfer cash money payments. So Canada does have one to a degree, and probably a lot of other Western liberal democracies as well. This is more means tested. It's not universal, although neither would a universal basic income be universal, because for some income groups it's going to be all clawed back in taxes, and probably more than you think, because in order to fund automatic welfare, to even if it was means tested, you're talking a huge figure, um, and that's going to mean a lot of taxes. And then the problem is that these high taxes are going to lead to situations where you've got individuals on the margin who are working, but because of the taxes they're set up, they're not getting that much more than UBI, even though they're working 160 hours a month. They could be getting only an extra $500, $800, let's say. So they're effectively, their marginal increase per hour worked is only like $5 an hour. And at that point, it would be pretty tempting just to take the UBI and then, go write the Canadian novel, or try to make Grandmaster in StarCraft, and then that's going to lead to higher taxes, because now more people are on UBI, higher taxes on the remaining workers, and there's going to be a certain amount of, people are looking at like 60-70% marginal tax rates on 50,000 in income. They're going to think to themselves, well, why am I here, providing for all these people, when I could go to a different country and work and enjoy a lower marginal tax revenue. So I don't think a UBI would be effective at all.
As far as distributing wealth equally.
Well, I am not. Well, first of all, you just got to get that phrase "equal" out of your mind, right? Because at no point, I mean, in China, there's billionaires that are very wealthy. There's people with lower wages.
Ooh, the non-egalitarian communist. What? Does this guy even know what communism is?
We're not trying. I learned that in school too. The communists want everyone to get paid the exact same wage, no matter how hard they work. That's not in Marx anywhere, right? So you got
to each according to their ability, from each according to their need. Not the exact same wage, but yeah, that's basic socialist thinking, that everybody should be equal. Egalitarianism. What are you talking about? That's not in Marx anywhere. That's like core Marxist thought.
to forget that word.
Why do they hate the billionaires? Because they have so much more than everybody else. There should be no billionaires. Eat the rich. Everybody should be equal. That's egalitarianism is at the core of communist philosophy. What is this guy trying to?
Right, that's just not what's going on there, right? It's about central planning of the means of production. It's about society rationally controlling the means of production. But as far as the universal basic income,
so it's about some government bureaucrat dictating how scarce resources should be allocated, instead of the miracle of the price system, which informs entrepreneurs how to direct scarce resources for maximum utility of the consumers through the actions of consumers on the market, buying and selling. There's no way that some central planning board is going to do as good a job as the market economy in rationally allocating scarce resources. Someone claimed, and I'm not sure on this figure whatsoever. You know what? I can pause and look it up. So I'm going to do just that. If my freaking mouse.
I'm not against it, right?
Yeah, so 24 million different prices had to be set in the Soviet Union, and there's just no way that some government bureaucrat can do that, or any team or committee or supercomputer. What you need is the price system, because that'll tell you when goods get scarce. And this was Mises's point in the socialist calculation debate, was that yes, for consumer goods, you could just replace whatever is purchased. Okay, that's not actually a problem. You know, somebody goes to the store, buys a bag of Dorito chips, you know, and you say, okay, we need more Dorito chips here. People are eating these chips, but when it comes to capital goods, when it comes to what should be produced for higher order goods that are higher up in the chain of production, when you're producing not consumer goods, but factories or equipment in factories, or even raw materials like steel and copper or whatever. So how do you determine how much of what to produce in the Soviet in the command economy? There's no way, and there's just no good answer to that. Maybe Caleb's got one. Let's hear what he's got to say.
The idea of having a universal basic income, it would be great, but it's not going to solve the problem. And I'm concerned about how the Forward Party guy, Andrew Yang, some of it, the way he presents it, he says, well, we'll just give everyone a bank transfer every month, right? Like $1,000, right? We'll just give everyone $1,000 every month. But then we're going to get rid of food stamps, and we're going to get rid of unemployment insurance, and we're going to get rid of WIC and everyone just gets an automatic bank transfer. And what he really wants to do is eliminate thousands and thousands and thousands of government jobs, right? And that leads to all kinds of people that have good paying jobs with benefits and high wages and union representation losing their jobs, and all of a sudden they don't have that money to spend, right?
They can just get new jobs in the private sector, creating wealth instead of living off other people. I mean, that's the whole point behind a UBI, is that you streamline the system, you get rid of the bureaucracy. It's a lot more efficient. I'm not in favor of it, but that's the whole point behind it, is you get rid of all that bureaucracy. The money's just going directly to help people. And yes, these people lose their jobs, but they've got all this experience. They can do whatever they do in the public sector, in the private sector. They can be clerks or, paper pushers, accountants. I mean, a lot of the skills are going to translate over. I don't know precisely what all these people are doing, but they can find jobs in the non-profit sector as well.
Right, so like thousands of government employees lose their jobs, and everyone just gets a bank transfer, and we basically, all that money that would be going into the economy from those government jobs vanishes.
What are you talking about? That money doesn't come out of thin air. It comes off people's paychecks. It's taken out of the economy, and then it is spent on these bureaucrats' salaries and their consumption. If you just left it in the economy, it would be there, reinvested in the economy, in creating more wealth, in reinvestment in capital, in new businesses, instead of just consumption of wealth. We would have more production, more wealth in the first place, and more jobs, more economic opportunities. I mean, these people believe in something for nothing. They think the government is Santa Claus, that when the government spends money, then that comes out of nowhere, and the economy's booming, there's a massive multiplier, and it's a fairy tale. It's absolutely 100% false. It makes no sense if you think about it for more than 2 seconds. All of the bureaucrats' salaries, they come from at the expense of the economic sector, of the economic class, of businessmen, of workers, of anybody that's in the private sector creating wealth. So yeah, absolutely. The more you can cut government spending, the better. And government spending is very bad for the economy and bad for the prosperity of the nation.
I don't agree with, right? I am for a universal basic income if it is in addition to other programs. But if it's a
And that's the real problem with advocating for a UBI, is they're never going to get rid of welfare and EI and socialized medicine and public health care and public education, which is why Milton Friedman suggested the negative income tax in the first place, to get rid of this whole package of benefits and give people cash. Because when you spend money, you spend it on your highest valued ends. This gives you the greatest increase in utility, in satisfaction, happiness. So if the government spends money on your behalf, even if they're spending on something great like fighting climate change or healthcare or education, these are almost never going to be your most highly valued ends. Your highest value end is paying my rent, or buying food, or making sure your kids have clothes, right? These are the priorities for most people. Everybody has different priorities, but whatever your priorities are. So in this sense, a cash transfer like UBI makes sense, because at least that money is going to the most urgent needs of the people who receive it. So compared to government spending in general, the welfare state spending, a huge bureaucracy, where you're paying social workers to go, yes, that's very sad. Yes, and they can't really do anything. Compared to just wasting that money on the salaries of government bureaucrats, sure, it's a lot better. But even better still is just not having these taxes in the first place, just having a market economy, and that creates a lot more opportunities, because, as Ronald Reagan said, and I'm not deputizing Reagan, I'm not a fan of Reagan, but as he said, and this is 100% true, the best welfare program is a good job, right? So what you need is a highly functioning economy, a dynamic market economy with limited taxes, limited regulation, free market, laissez-faire. That's the best way to make everybody rich. Okay, not government bureaucracy, not communism, not any of these other schemes that have never worked, that have been attempted and have failed. But laissez-faire capitalism, that's the proven winner. Okay, we have seen it work every time that it has been attempted. It has been a radical success, skyrocketing standards of living for everybody in society, and it's the only way to go.
Replacement for the programs, if it's a way to just eliminate government jobs, I'm not for it. And what also concerns me is, there's many different models of UBI. There's many different versions of it. But the thing is, he says everyone gets it automatic.
There's about as many models of UBI as there are of socialism.
Every American citizen, $1,000, fine. But there's going to be somebody who comes along and says, well, what about child rapists who get out of prison? Should they get $1,000? And
oh no.
Everyone's going to say, no, we don't want pedophiles to get $1,000. So then they're going to take that away from those people, right?
Caleb, boldly defending the.
And then they're going to say, well, what about axe murderers?
Axe murderers should definitely not qualify for the freedom dividend.
Murderers, they shouldn't get it. And then they're going to take it away from those people. And pretty soon, you're going to have a layer of people that have nothing, right? If you've gotten rid of food stamps, you've gotten rid of.
They came for the axe murderers, and I said nothing, for I was not an axe murderer.
All the social programs, you're going to have a layer of people there.
Why didn't they just shoot the axe murderer, for being an axe murderer? I mean, this guy's killed multiple people with an axe, all right?
That have no ability to survive, and that's very, very dangerous. And that concerns me as well.
Why don't they get a fucking job?
I don't buy that it would always be guaranteed to every citizen. That sounds nice on paper, but we all know there's a lot of very hateable people in this world that everyone would like to take money away from.
You're one of them, pal.
You know what I'm saying? And then that leads to some big problems. What do you say to that?
Yeah, Nick, what do you say?
Yeah, I mean, that's a slippery slope that I hope we don't slide down. I mean, I'm for reinstalling the voting right.
Nick with the cool jazz rhetoric
of felons, and I believe
I would have liked to see like a little that we don't slide down.
in Reformation. I believe that people, are allowed second, third, fourth, fifth chances and can grow and overcome, their smaller states and the misdeeds that they've done. So hopefully we could set it up in a way that it doesn't, become that kind of a takeaway or zero sum game. I also think that, the newer versions proposed are a progressive universal basic income, so that the top 7 or 8% of earners, you earn your wage anyway, but net effect is that you actually end up getting taxed to fund the basic income of the lower 90%.
Okay.
And so there's all sorts of iterations that are coming out with it. I think it's a great leap forward as far as economic science and making money work for us again, because money's a tool for people. It's a tool for accounting, your labor and your contribution to society. And it's gotten away from us as a tool. It's not really serving us. It's serving really wealthy people. And they're able to arbitrage their time and make money in ways that regular people can't. I'm learning this getting out of college. And
Yeah, I'm not really on board with Nick here or his hatred of capital. And yeah, I mean, it's true. The rich do have that advantage, but that wealth was created. It didn't just happen. So, even if they inherited it, it was created by their grandpapa or their father or whatever. Um, and I just don't buy this whole politics of envy, oh boo hoo, somebody's better off than me. That's not what matters. What matters is, what system is going to improve things now, especially for lowest income people, the ones who are worst off in society. Absolutely, that should be the focus. And I think probably all three of us would agree there. That should be the focus of any economic system. What improves material conditions for the bottom 15% income earners, right? But the answer, I think, is very clear, is laissez-faire. Every experiment in laissez-faire, you look at late 19th century America, very laissez-faire, wages were rising extremely fast, as fast as 48% for industrial workers, men, women, and children. These children were working back then, in a decade, 48%, okay? You think we're seeing that sort of wage growth now? How about Hong Kong, post-World War II era, extremely libertarian, extremely laissez-faire, limited government, very hands-off the economy, very fiscally prudent government, not borrowing a lot of money, not spending more than they had, running surpluses, more years than not, which is not a record that a lot of countries had during this time period. And what was the result? Hong Kong is a barren rock with no natural resources. Now it's the financial center of Asia, with a per capita income that rivals any first world country. And, the proof is in the pudding. So what we need is not, this hatred of the rich and this envy and greed and despise anybody who's doing better than you. What we need is laissez-faire, is limited government, capitalism, free market capitalism, not government intervention, not statism, not socialism, not whatever Nick's been smoking. We need freedom. Freedom.
Just struggling, working a regular job. It's tough times, and so I think that there's a lot of room for cooperation, and I think that there's even you might see them as two wings of the extreme. I think that the Libertarian Party and socialists, they agree on a lot more than they think, and slowly, and especially with
No, we disagree on everything. Almost everything. maybe some elements of foreign policy. Even then, no, we're completely socialism and freedom are diametrically opposed. Okay, you can have a free society, you can have state control. We're completely in conflict.
Episodes like this, it comes out more and more that it's the establishment we're supposed to fight.
Great. Well, Nick, I've got a couple other people in line behind you.
What is this Center for Political Innovation, and why is it run out of this guy's basement?
So I guess I want to thank you for being polite and for putting your ideas. Is there anything you want to plug before you go?
No, thank you. Check out the Forward Party.
All right, cool. Thanks, Nick, and good luck.
Smoke weed every day.
All right, so the next person that I see, and I'm going to have to kick the guest from studio because we got a lot of people coming in. It's filling up. The next person, I have to see your face if you come on. So Ryan Ashmiller, you're next, but I can't see you. So Samuel is next. So Samuel.
I've just seen a face. I can't forget the time or place that we just met.
Hey, Samuel. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing, Caleb?
Samuel T. Weed. These guys are all fucking stoners.
Can you hear me?
That's probably how they found out about this guy in the first place. They're like, oh man, I'm so high. I'm going to get some Doritos and check out YouTube and listen to some communists.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
All right, good. Yep, I can hear you.
All right.
Always
Tell
got
me
to check
about
that.
communism.
So first thing I want to say is you totally mischaracterized what Joshua Smith said to you, saying
That's what I said.
he has kids. He said that he is having a kid tonight. His wife is giving birth. So I'm sure
he called me a childless freak or something like that, which how does he know I don't have children? I could have 10 kids for all he knows.
You probably do have 10 kids in a fucking in a cellar somewhere, you commie freak.
Well, you
college.
You could, but don't get nerves pricked or anything. You seem like a kind of guy who likes to debate ideas, right?
Sure. I mean, and that's the thing. That's why when this woman, she says communism is a death cult, and I say, well, actually, it's something.
Communism is definitely a death cult. Look at Cambodia. Look at the Soviet Union. Look at Maoist China. I mean, it's a death cult.
So she just says you're retarded. That's not an argument, right? I mean, I can call.
No, it's an insult.
All her childish names also, and then she blocks me. This Carrie
Ann Harlos called you retarded.
And then she blocks me and starts tweeting then behind the block about how I actually want to sleep with her. Like that's some AOC level bullshit, right? I mean, where does?
That's a nice phrase. AOC level bullshit. I'm gonna steal that. No, I'm gonna redistribute that.
This idea that any woman that you debate, right, she can win the argument by saying, "Well, you just want to sleep." with me.
And yeah, I think so. I think her response was your assertion that communism brought China and Russia out of poverty in the 19th, 20th century. Okay. Do you know anything about the Great Chinese Starvation?
Yeah, I do actually.
It was pretty good, right? Yeah, let's talk about that.
All right. Yeah. So what was China like before the Chinese Communist Party came to power?
Oh, it was terrible.
What was China like? Poor. Very poor. There was the Chiang Kai-shek guy who he was like fighting the Chinese. I guess. Well, was this World War II then? I don't even know. I gotta learn some about that stuff.
Terrible. And it got much
like now.
It got much better after they killed all of the people by stealing
No, what is it
farms.
like now? I'm asking you, what is it like now? What is
China like now?
Compared to how it was before.
So you're saying that the greatest
is China.
China's much more prosperous today than it was 100 years ago.
Better off now.
So
millions of people have been lifted from poverty. How many power plants were there before the Chinese Communist Party came into power?
Well, it was like. Was this 1920? Like, how many power plants were there anywhere?
Oh, well, did they have pickles there?
How many are there now?
Did they have pickles?
Steel mills. Did you know China didn't have a single steel mill before the Communist Party came to power?
Now
they make half the steel in the world. Did you know that?
Before the Super Bowl era, China was way worse off So I think since we started having the Super Bowl every year,
were there famines before the Chinese communists came to power? Were there famines before they came to power? Now, who cured the famines in China? Hundreds of millions of people were dying every year, over and over and over. People were dying. They had the century of humiliation where
hundreds of millions
all the time under capitalism, under free trade, people were dying. The Chinese Communist Party came in. They
imperialism
brought tractors to the countryside, prevented China from ever having something like that again, which happened all the time before they came to power. That's what you're missing.
So his argument there, I had been in an emergency with the power cable not being connected on my laptop, was that yes, there was mass starvation, famines in China, but there's always been famines in China, and Mao ended the famines. Things are much better now, much more prosperous now today.
Right? You know, I mean,
I gotta say, this Samuel T. Weed guy seems like a bit of a meme lord.
I don't understand this. Like, so, I'm trying to think of an analogy that might be good, but it's like, what might be a good analogy? If someone's a drug addict for 20 years and then they go into rehab, and after they've been in rehab for a year, they relapse, right? And then they go back into rehab and then they never use drugs again. Is rehab responsible for them using drugs?
Oh, so you're saying the opposite is true for communism?
I'm saying that communism cured China of having starvation. And you're saying that because there was an episode of starvation in the early 60s, that doesn't count.
Well, what actually happened in 1959? What happened?
In 1959, there was...
What happened? Did someone come to power?
Politics that they were trying to rapidly industrialize. The Soviet Union cut them off, right? The Soviet Union had been helping them develop, and the Soviet Union cut them off. And they had people misreporting how much they were growing, and there was confusion, and it led to a disaster. The same kind of disaster that had happened over and over and over again. There was a famine in 1928 where millions of people died. There was a famine in 1946.
So famines have been endemic throughout human history. In 16th century France, there were dozens of famines. Roman times, famines. Pretty much every society had recurring famines up until industrialization in first England and then the rest of Europe and America. That put an end to famines. Capitalism put an end to famines. But Caleb's right that famines ended too. Under Mao, but there's a categorical difference because industrialization ended famines in England and in Europe and in the USA, whereas under communism they were industrializing and they had famines at the same time. Because the reason why industrialization and famines in the West was because you would still have droughts and crop failures and bad years of agricultural production, but now you have the industrial capacity. You could trade with other nations, so that's what ended famines in the West. And but the thing with China and with Russia is that government policy greatly exacerbated both of these famines. And Caleb, to his credit, seems to reference that. He doesn't spell it out. He says mistakes were made. Well, what mistakes were made? With the Great Leap Forward, they were trying to industrialize. So Mao told all these peasants to start melting down their hoes, and then the agricultural production plummeted and everyone started starving. And we're talking about, 40, 50, 60 million people. This is not a rounding error. I know China's a big place, but this is a huge, huge famine. And there was the famine in Ireland, which was also caused by bad government policy. So, the communists aren't entirely alone with this. There was, famines in India, in Bengal, that were under British control. But as to the greater question, I mean, he's saying, okay, is China better today? I don't think that's the metric. I think you have to look at the rate of progress. Why was Hong Kong growing so much faster than mainland China? I think that if China had adopted laissez-faire capitalism from the 40s, they would be much, much further along than they were. And really, the economic growth in China only started to happen when they moved away from state ownership of the means of production to private ownership of the means of production. That's when you saw a lot of the growth happening. There's also the question of how much can we trust these statistics coming out of the communist country, which I don't.
People died. There was a famine in 1890 where millions of people died. There was famines all the time. Are those famines the fault of capitalism?
So your analysis is that the Great Starvation that happened in the late 50s and early 60s
is not representative.
No, your characterization.
Bad thing that happened one time that the Chinese Communist Party cured does not speak for the entire experience of that.
I want to ask you though, and I broke your rule.
Back to my drug rehab example, right?
Well,
if
I broke your rule.
Uses drugs for 20 years, goes into rehab to stop using drugs, then relapses in rehab for a year.
Okay, now you're just talking over him, Caleb. Let him. You've already said this bit about the rehab. We heard you. Let him ask what he's going to ask.
And then goes back into rehab and never uses drugs again. Did rehab cause them to be a drug addict?
No.
So my question to you,
in that situation,
yeah, it is rehab's fault. Yes, in your retarded
even though
analogy.
Them, but it just had a relapse during the
So I want to know what you're honest, and let's have a good faith.
Why would rehab? No, that's not true, Samuel. Why would rehab make them be a drug addict? The drugs or their biology or whatever. I mean, rehab, if anything, it's going to help them stop being a drug addict.
Let's have
because you get clean, and then once you get clean, you have a different perception of drug use sometimes than when you're in active addiction.
a good faith discussion.
Not that I would know anything about that.
China before the communists.
Is your assertion that it was a lie?
This is bad debate. I mean, yelling over and talking over people, these are their Fox News tactics, people. Let's have an exchange of ideas. Although I do like the combativeness, but I think Samuel maybe not so nuanced in his arguments.
Lack of central planning that caused the Great Starvation in China? It was a lack of central planning caused that?
My assertion is that the Great Leap Forward was a failure as they were trying to set up what they'd never had.
This is smart, okay? So Caleb, he's acknowledging the mistakes, acknowledging the fallibility, and I mean you have to, right? Because it was absolutely a lot of government contributory, but he could salvage the whole situation by arguing that China is better off today because of communism, which isn't true. It's because of capitalism, as I said. But it's a smart debate tactic. Concede one point, lose the battle to hopefully still win the war, and and you're gonna come off more nuanced and understanding of the situation. Samuel's a bit unhinged here.
Was a modern agricultural system. And as they were bringing tractors to the countryside, and as they were building power plants, and as they were constructing a national plan in order to get rid of these things,
something the free market didn't do anywhere. Something that wasn't able to be accomplished.
Yeah, I don't like this constant interrupting. I don't think that's a good tactic. Let your opponent finish their thought and then respond.
accomplished by the free market anywhere else in the industrialized world.
Really? Because there were hundreds of millions of people that died before the communists came in. In 1928, Edgar Snow, the author of Red Star Over China, talked about how he was in 1928 in
See, citing books, facts. This is argumentation.
China, and millions of people were starving to death. And one of the main reasons they were starving to death was because China had no central government to mobilize relief. When the crops failed in one area, the government had no ability. There was no central government. There were warlords that controlled different regions, and they had no ability to bring food from one area to another, right? But with the central leadership of the Chinese Communist Party, they were able to mobilize famine relief. So continue. You just have to let me talk. I'll mute you for a little bit.
Yeah, no, I know, because I broke your first rule. No, I was supposed to come on and talk about what I think communism is. Okay, communism is a beautiful idea for people who have the ability to mute others and for some reason think it's a good idea to tie a tie and then put a cover over it. What the fuck is that?
You're making childish insults now, so... Alright, next. Next.
Excellent trolling, Samuel T. Weed.
There you go. Yeah, he was losing the argument there. The communists cured starvation in China, right?
We cured starvation by causing it.
Right? And somehow, because there was some...
Because after all the people starved to death, they weren't hungry anymore.
Some starvation in the process, that proves that communism has never worked anywhere, even though communism turned China into a superpower, etc.
I mean, their per capita income is still very low. I wouldn't want to live there. Plus, it's a whole dictatorship with no freedom, that whole thing. I mean, what are you going to do when the mobile execution van comes and steals your organs?
Right. But anyway, Ryan, I can't bring you on because I can't see your face. So next I'm going to bring on David O'Gwin. Welcome, David. How you doing? I can't hear you, David. You're muted.
How's that? Is that better?
Good. Welcome. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm good.
All right, what's the over-under on David O'Gwin being a member of a militia force?
Well, good.
Do you want to introduce yourself or anything, or you just want to get down to business?
Well, I'm just a fellow that's trying to get this thing to... My mouse doesn't want to work. Here we go. There we go. All right. Good times, man.
Sure.
So, I'm here to talk. I'm just here to, defend Joseph, to defend Josh, right?
Okay.
So, you tell me how it is that you and Josh got into a tiff, and let's just have a conversation between the two of us. How about that?
I have no idea. I didn't even know who this Josh guy was until I looked. I assumed I've got a million libertarian accounts coming at me right now, right?
Okay, why? What's going on?
Because I argued with this Carolyn person, and she called me retarded, and so we got into it, and then a million accounts are coming
The simps. The army of libertarian simps.
At me. So I saw somebody attack me, and I didn't know who they were, but then I saw this guy's got like 26,000 followers on Twitter.
Sure.
He's a Libertarian Party candidate. So I thought, okay.
Damn, that's a lot of followers.
And now he's claiming he knows more about communism than I do. So I wanted to have a conversation with him. And he's not here, and I'd prefer to have a debate with him like directly face to face rather than
that's fine.
So I mean, if you want to go over the thing about me not having children and him having children, I'd rather not get into that right now.
No, I don't want to do that.
You want to talk about other things.
Well, I don't know whether you have kids or you don't have kids. You might have a bunch of kids. That's fine. So was it Carrie Ann Harlos? Is that who it was?
I think so. Yeah, I don't know my libertarians very well.
Well, Carrie Ann's she's a radical libertarian. She's an anarchist, right?
Okay. Well, anarchism is a form of socialist ideology. So I don't think she's an anarchist.
I don't know that anarchist.
Look at all the famous anarchists in history. Emma Goldman was a socialist. Mikhail Bakunin was a socialist. It's this in the 70s. Milton Friedman's son.
Okay, this is a semantic argument. Technically, I think you could say he's correct if you take the term anarchist to mean no rulers and no hierarchy, and basically the classless communist society that Marx describes. The way, of course, that anarcho-capitalists such as myself use the term means no state, but we're still in favor of hierarchy. Then you have the individualist anarchists like Lysander Spooner or Benjamin Tucker. Tucker was socialist, but also an individualist, and he had more redeeming aspects of political thought than most socialists. Either way, it's not really an interesting debate. You could say liberal or libertarian or free market or voluntarist. I mean, it's just a label, not one we're necessarily or right anti-government. I mean, you could say it any way you want, really.
In what sense? That's my
And
question.
it's a school of socialist thought, right? Among socialists,
That's-
you generally have social
You're
democracy.
giving a tautology. It's socialism because it's socialism. What does
Yeah.
that mean?
Well, there are different brands of Marxist and
Ooh, tautology. That's argument by definition, or you're saying the same thing twice. Not even 100% on that. It's a nice $5 word.
socialist thought.
David O. Gwynn, clearly schooled in the arts of philosophy.
One of them is a belief that socialism cannot be created through coercion, right? That the state cannot be used to create socialism. That reject.
That's quite in contrast with the tanky view that you need the dictatorship of the proletariat to be the vanguard of the revolution and to safeguard the socialist commonwealth during the long and arduous transition to full communism.
Rejects all state activity. And that is the socialism that Emma Goldman advocated, Bakunin advocated, Proudhon advocated, etc. That's one brand of socialist thought, and the great anarchists throughout history are adherents of that teaching. It wasn't until Milton Friedman's son started calling himself an anarcho-capitalist.
Let's get it straight, all right? Murray Rothbard was the first person to use the term.
That we started having them. Free market thought and anarchism they were never associated with each other. But we're arguing semantics here. This isn't important.
No,
so
that's fine. But the semantics are important, and that's fine. You mentioned that you said that anarchism is a brand of socialist thought, and then you told me that all of the people that believed in that the people like Emma Goldman and others were anarchists in the sense that they believed that socialism could be brought about only in the absence of state coercions.
Right.
That still does not define what socialism is. Could you help me out there?
Okay.
What does it mean to be socialist?
Well, I'm going to put a quote on the screen from the Communist Manifesto.
Great.
So we'll just go from there. All right. Let me just pull up the quote. All right.
This guy's got to get better with the quotes on the screen, you know? Oh God, he's gonna start preaching again.
That's not.
Here we go.
That's okay. All right, help me out here.
The proletariat will use its political supremacy to wrest by degrees all capital from the bourgeoisie.
Is there a definition of socialism in here? Let's first just quickly read it without this guy talking. No, there's no definition of socialism here. Why can't you just say socialism is worker ownership of the means of production, or socialism is state ownership of the means of production? And I think David O'Gwyn is actually being a little crafty here in forcing Caleb to define socialism, because a classic socialist debating tactic is when you put forth one of the many definitions of socialism advanced by socialists to say, oh, no, that's not the right definition. You're an idiot. What the fuck are you talking about? You don't even know anything. Actually, it's this. Blah, 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 blah. So, it's dishonest. It's disingenuous. But that's communist for you.
bourgeoisie and to centralize all instruments of production into the hands of the state, i.e., the proletariat organized as the ruling class, and to increase the total production.
All right, I guess you could say there's a definition right there. The centralizing of the means of production in the hands of the state. Although, is this socialism or is this the first step in the revolution of the working class? I guess you could say that is socialism, is the initial stage. But when does the raw communism come in?
Forces as rapidly as possible. That's the idea. The centralization of the means of production in the hands of a revolutionary working class government.
Okay.
Yeah. It's the idea is the broad masses of people. We win the battle for democracy. We seize control of the means of production, and we organize them centrally in order to
democracy. Aren't you a revolutionary Marxist, or you wanna win at the ballot box?
raise our forces in society. That's
Okay.
the idea.
Okay,
Do you want me to
that's
put that on the screen, or do you want me to take
no,
it?
that's fine. You're
Okay.
helping out a lot. All right. How are they gonna?
Checkmate, socialist. Look how many books I have in the background.
Know how to run any of that?
What do you mean?
Well, we got the
You're gonna seize the means of production. How many of you know how to operate the means of production? Well, I don't think that's necessarily. I mean, they're workers. They're in there working all the time. They know pretty much what to do without the boss telling them what to do. If they're experienced workers, don't they?
means of production. I assume we're talking about
Is the managerial class really that vital? They can't be replaced by workers?
capital accumulation in the form of machinery and of systems and of all the things that end up giving us the things that we need to be able to survive. How is the proletariat going to know how to build, maintain, and further enhance all of that capital accumulation?
I think that there will be technicians and specialists who handle these things, and I think that there will be
Pretty good question from David here.
obviously individuals, just like there are in socialist societies around the world, who have the task of engaging in central planning, just like at major corporations under capitalism right now. Walmart has people whose job it is to figure out how many products go to what store and where these things are assigned. There's all kinds of
Pretty nice response. Not I think dispositive of capitalism by any means, but a solid argument. Aren't big corporations? Isn't Walmart, which is almost a monopolist on retail sales, although not really, especially with Bezos and Amazon and whatnot. But aren't they engaged in central planning? It's a nice argument.
central planning in which there are
I
individuals.
mean, I'm not even certain how I would counter that off the top of my head. That would be a one I'd like to research.
Individuals who are tasked with central planning and carrying these things out. I don't know how to repair my computer, but if my computer breaks, I'll take it to a computer repair shop, and there'll be somebody who does know how to do it. The idea that every person is
I could repair a computer. I mean, look at the error message, swap out the parts, find what's broken. Doesn't have that many pieces.
going to know every machine or every task. That's ridiculous, right? I mean, maybe you've heard some of this workplace democracy stuff that's floating around. Maybe that's where you're getting this impression from. I'm not against the idea of a worker cooperative, but that's not the essence of socialism. Socialism is about abolishing the anarchy of production and ensuring that economic growth can continue without, the problems inherent in the market. That's how I see it.
It's not an anarchy of production. The price system clearly instructs production along the most efficacious lines.
Okay, so when we get rid of the market, we will be able to have a set of people who know enough to be able to make everything that the market makes. Is that
Here's
right?
the thing. I am at the point where I think that if you look at the successful socialist societies of today,
Oh no. Market socialism incoming in 1, 2,
okay, like Vietnam, like China, like Nicaragua, that they use the market, but they use it for consumer goods, right? I don't think the government should be making children's toys. That would be ridiculous, right? We're gonna have some government bureaucrat decide.
Oh, quite the contrary, my friend. Uh, state monopoly, socialism only works for consumer goods, does not work for capital goods.
I know people can vote with their dollars, right? I don't think the government should run hotels and restaurants, but the power plants, the big steel mills, the assigning of credit and banking, there needs to be central planning, but within a central.
Okay, at least here we have a coherent argument, which is nationalize the crucial industries, the ones that people depend upon, need, presumably healthcare, education, housing, agriculture, food, but leave the frivolous stuff to the market. Not a good argument, not a sound argument by any means, but a coherent one.
Really planned economy. I think the market does have a very good role,
and not good because look at all the places that have tried this, horrible failures.
Things that make life good, right? Things that make life enjoyable, entertainment, these kind of things. Yeah, people can vote with their dollars.
Cruise ships, privatize the cruises.
I think that there's a role for that, and that yes, if you have a bureaucrat sitting there and deciding what.
I'm surprised this commie allows us to have cruises and frivolous luxuries in the first place.
Clothes get manufactured and things like that. You're gonna have a problem. I think that that's one thing we learned from the fall of the Soviet Union. That Stalin model of doing things was very effective at industrializing the Soviet Union. Wiping out illiteracy, raising that country up, inventing space travel, electrifying the whole place, taking people from living in rural huts.
All right, let me just address this whole nonsense about, okay, the argument he's putting forth that Stalin, sure he was a bad guy, but he industrialized Russia. He brought them from an agrarian nation into, the global superpower. Okay, so let's look at conditions for Russian consumers in 1982, as per the New York Times. So here's the quote. At noontime one day last week, the meat counter was down to pitiful cuts of beef and mutton, mostly fat and bone. After a few weeks late last year when it disappeared from Moscow shops, butter was on sale again, but with a limit of 1.1 pounds per shopper. The vegetable counter boasted symmetrically arranged displays of carrots, beetroot, and cabbage, but much of it was rotten. So even towards the end of the Soviet Union, when all these sacrifices had been made and you had the glorious, Soviet engine of production finally kicking in, there's still nothing for consumers. So what good is the system if it's not making people's lives better? If they're waiting in line for food, and the food they get is horrible. It's rotten. They industrialized, but it wasn't the same as the industrialization that occurred in capitalist countries, because it was centrally planned. So you had instead of being responsive to consumer demand, you just have government planners deciding what's going to be produced. You're constantly having shortages, and so looking at some of the other conditions, children could not purchase milk without a doctor's prescription. Hospital power outages were routine, and the government initiated a public awareness campaign about the dangers of overeating. Granted, I and certainly a lot of people in Western society could probably benefit from that campaign. Medical bureaucrats used anesthesia as a form of extortion. It was unavailable for surgeries unless you bribed the doctor or the party apparatchik that was in charge of that. Another key point with regards to Soviet industrialization is that they were able to piggyback off Western technology that had been developed through painstaking efforts through the market economy and individual inventors. So they did have a big hand up in that, all of these, they're going through industrialization in the 20th century. England went through industrialization in the 18th century. America, mostly with manufacturing towards the end of the 19th century. So they have a big advantage there in terms of, it's easier to copy technology that already exists. A lot of the know-how is readily available. You can send somebody to a Western school to learn how to do this stuff. It's a lot easier than reinventing the wheel yourself.
The whole society from being a backward agrarian country to being an industrial country. But when it came to things like, clothing, shoes, consumer goods, soda, they were lacking. And China and...
When it came to stuff that actually would improve people's lives in any meaningful way. But hey, we can send a chimp into outer space, so we're fucking awesome.
Vietnam and Nicaragua and some of the other socialist societies, Cuba today, they've adjusted that, And, and I don't think...
Yeah, because people are fucking living in luxury in Cuba today. Living on rice and beans every meal. No, Cuba's still desperately poor.
The idea of people starting a business and trying to make a profit is inherently opposed to the idea that you could have a state central planner who regulates and controls it to make sure that growth is uninterrupted. What do you think?
Well, I just have to wonder, somebody who is running a bodega somewhere that's selling consumer level goods, I think all of those consumer level goods are coming from the component parts that make up those consumer level goods, which ultimately leads back to the trucks and all of the manufacturing and the means of production. So ultimately, if you have a central planner that's planning all of the component parts of a market economy that's producing consumer level goods, you're going to have consumer level goods that are governed by the central planners. I don't see how you can escape that.
Right. Yeah, just like the central planners of Walmart. They centrally plan to make sure that Walmart stores have the supplies they need, just like the central planners of Amazon. They centrally plan to make sure all the products get where they go. They use computers to do it in some cases. In other cases, they use mathematical formulas and all of that. And that there's a huge amount of central planning in capitalism. It's just to maximize profits for shareholders. And the idea is that in the major centers, the commanding heights of the economy, this vehicle of central planning would be utilized to make sure that there was uninterrupted growth in the economy. I think that's the idea, right? When it comes to making raw material like steel, when it comes to natural resources, oil, natural gas, coal, timber, when it comes to, the healthcare system, making sure everyone can go to the doctor when they're sick, these kind of things can be centrally allocated strategically, and then let the market do the other things, right? And, maybe in Nicaragua, they have worker cooperatives. That's a really big thing. And cooperatives are good, right? And they have a micro-entrepreneurship program. And this is one of the weird things, right, is that I know a lot of libertarians are small business owners, and they don't like the fact that the government regulations that crush small businesses are written by the big businesses.
That's a solid point. That's actually the origin of regulation in the United States during the Progressive Era. Simply, as he says, imposing high fixed costs on a given industry is an effective means by which established business interests can crack down on their smaller competitors.
To crush them, right? The big corporations, Amazon, Jeff Bezos.
That being said, I am not anti-corporation, anti-big business. I think big business is awesome. I'm not in favor of big business lobbying for special privileges or anything like that. I'm opposed to, the government picking winners and losers in the market economy. But I'm a big fan of big business because companies like Walmart, they can dictate to the supply chain, they can keep prices low, and that leads to higher standards of living especially for the working class. So I am a big fan of big business. I just don't think that we should have this regulatory environment that punishes small business. I'm not anti-small business. Uh, I don't worship small business. Like a lot of politicians seem to really worship small business because that's a popular position. I'm not really for big or small business. I'm pro business in general. I like whatever works, whatever brings costs down, whatever is cheapest for consumers, delivers the best quality, and but big business is a central part in why the world is so prosperous today. So I don't think it should be demonized or attacked.
They write the rules, and they write them to crush the little guy. But when I go to Nicaragua, what I see is a government that is working and subsidizing those small businesses and has nationalized and seized the big businesses and is controlling the major centers and is allowing a prosperous middle class to emerge, right? And I see that in China as well. The government is controlling the big economic centers in order to allow the small business owners and those folks to flourish.
Yeah. Well, I guess the big question that I've got is that what happens when Walmart goes bankrupt?
What do you mean?
If Walmart goes bankrupt because of poor decisions, what does that look like?
Well, I mean, in the model that I'm discussing, Walmart would be public property.
Oh, no, I understand, but in the current system, just the way things are right now, if Walmart goes bankrupt, what's the...
A lot of Walmart workers lose their jobs. A lot of people don't have a place to shop.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really that dire, because what happens when a company goes under, maybe Walmart would be different because it's so massive, and there's not necessarily, maybe they are too big to fail. But typically, when a company goes under, their capital is just acquired by different companies. I don't even think Walmart would be that big a deal because, like, there's so many massive conglomerates today that as big as Walmart is, there's still so many other players. So if Walmart or any company goes bankrupt, it's not really that big a deal because all their capital is purchased by other firms, and they went bankrupt for a reason because they weren't providing what consumers wanted. So maybe there was inefficiency, graft, or they just weren't able to compete. There was better products being offered. I mean, presumably, if Walmart went bankrupt, it would be because a different retail outlet like Target or whatever was out competing them. So they would be the natural candidate too to acquire all of that capital and put it back to use. So there's a dynamism there that, Caleb's focusing on the negative, and there would be some short-term negative. People lose their jobs and don't have a place to shop, but those stores aren't just going to sit empty. They'll be put back into action quite quickly. I would imagine.
So
what happens when the Soviet Union goes bankrupt?
Well,
and this is a good point. What happens when you have inefficiencies within a state monopoly, and we see this in public education, where every year the cost goes up. There's tremendous inefficiencies because you're paying all these unnecessary salaries to all these administrators and all these other people that aren't actually doing the teaching. They have these massive buildings, and really you could just have like a teacher like in their living room with a couple TVs or a computer, and have the kids on Khan Academy, and you get the whole thing done for like 5% of the cost. I mean, I don't know if that's a viable model, but I think there would be a lot of more efficient ways to go about doing something than a government monopoly. And if you had a market economy or a market for education, then not only would it end up costing a lot less to the consumer, And don't imagine that just because it's paid for by taxes that it's free. I mean, the government will tell you they're robbing Peter to pay Paul, but you never know if you're going to be Peter or Paul. And a lot of taxes end up being paid by you regardless of what income bracket you're in. I mean, there's not enough rich people to just say soak the rich. So so not only if you had a market in education, would they compete on price, but also on quality and even just substance? I mean, do we really imagine that there is just one way to educate our youth? A monolithic model that's suited for every student in the entire country, and it's going to be the exact same? I mean, there are different models of education, some that are more hands-on, you know, vocational training, different, you know, different people have different abilities, and some people are more intellectually inclined, and others better with their hands, you know, that are mechanically or whatever. So I think that tremendous reform needs to be made in education, and if you had a market in education, that would happen organically as different entrepreneurs tried different things, and some of them would fail, some of them would be a joke, you know, you say, oh, that's horrible, but others would work really well, and then consumers would be able to pick and choose, you know, and they would end up paying a lot less, so they have more money for stuff like food and rent and whatever, you know, and you would end up with a higher quality of education, so that instead of just preaching obedience and conformity and turning out little obedient soldier worker bees for the state, you know, you actually unleash the creative capacity inherent in every individual and foster critical thinking and analysis and the ability to process ideas and challenge them. I'm sort of on a tangent here. I digress.
Free market capitalism comes in the 1990s, and economic shock therapy is imposed on the country, and the fall is...
Really? The 90s? We went to free market capitalism. We got rid of all the regulations and subsidies and taxes. And what world are you living in, bro?
Soviet Union was a great economic disaster.
Oh, he's talking about the Soviet Union. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. You know, but I think the real point is that you know, the Soviet Union just wasn't that good prior to privatization. Sure, maybe they could have privatized better. Like, for example, Javier Milei in Argentina, the president-elect or president now, I don't know. He's offering to give the airlines directly to the workers. I think that's a better way of privatizing than giving assets or selling assets cheap to oligarchs. But I think the real thing was that despite or because of rather all these decades of communism, things just never got that good in the first place. So yeah, they weren't that great after privatization either, because they weren't that great beforehand.
You know, and that's one of the things. It should have been amazing if this narrative that communism is the problem and that, you know, capitalism...
Well, no, it's you don't go from 0 to 90 overnight, and for that matter, I mean, it's not just having quote unquote capitalism or the private ownership of the means of production. Have a really thriving society, you need respect for the rule of law, respect for property rights. It probably wasn't the case in Russia at that time period. There's a lot of gangsterism. So there are conditions for a thriving society, aside from just saying, oh, we're capitalists now. And probably the process of privatization was botched. As always, it's the government's fault, right? They're in charge of doing the transition. So how you denationalize is a problem, and absolutely, but an important problem, one that requires a lot of thought. How do you get these assets into the private sector judiciously? You don't want to just like the last act of the Soviet regime is to transfer all the wealth to a few powerful political officials and then say, okay, now we have capitalism. Well, this is all private property now. You got to respect that. No, you want a system of reform that spreads that wealth around, that denationalized wealth. There's a lot of ways you could have done it, and I don't know exactly what they did in Russia, if they did auctions or whatnot, but I don't think it's fair to say that the conversion from state planned economy to a free market system should be easy, effortless, and everything's got to be roses immediately after. I mean, you're talking about a radical transformation in your entire society, in the worldview of all the people in it. That's going to be a chaotic, painful experience, much as the initial Soviet revolution was. And I mean, if there's one thing the Russian people know, it's suffering. So I don't think that's a legitimate argument that, oh, things weren't perfect immediately, ergo capitalism doesn't work. I mean, this is the nirvana fallacy, which is endemic in every leftist socialist argument. They say capitalism isn't working compared to some hypothetical impossible ideal, ergo you're wrong, we should have socialism, whereas they never hold socialism up to even a fraction of the critical examination of the capitalist system, and really that's an unfair double standard.
Brings solutions. The fall of the USSR should have been a moment of economic stability, but when they went in there and they implemented free market shock therapy, when Jeffrey Sachs, who's now kind of a leftist, but back in the day he was an adherent of Milton Friedman, when Boris Yeltsin had him running the economy, it was disastrous. They sold off all the state assets to private companies. They got rid of the social safety net. I've got data I can show you on the screen. The Russian economy passed through a long, wrenching depression. From 1990 to 1995,
Okay, one thing about these figures was that in the late 1980s, Soviet military expenditure was about 15 to 18% of the budget. So you look at GDP decline, and I don't think that's telling you the whole story, because there's a massive drop off in military spending, which is going to be a good thing for the economy, because instead of building a bunch of tanks, you're now going to build factories or whatever, buy consumer goods. And the so-called shock therapy that this guy Caleb is referencing, they eliminated the price controls. So sure, goods became very expensive, but before they just weren't available. So is it better for a good to be quote unquote cheap but you can't buy it, or for it to be there but you can't afford it? Well, maybe it's the same thing, but at least the option is there. And then so the price controls are deceiving. These statistics are very deceptive. It's also important to note these are official Russian economic statistics. There's also alternative estimates by Western neoliberal analysts that described a much less severe decline. So there is some conflicting data. And then I just want to read this bit I found in a paper some university published. So, because it ties back into the industrialization and the production. Since Stalin, it's a paper on inflation in the Soviet Union and hyperinflation, but Since Stalin, Soviet leaders were determined to increase the country's economic growth, but they attempted to do so without paying attention to the laws of economics. The state controlled almost all the means of production, and most economic decisions were made by the authorities. Administrative bodies set target production goals and allocated capital and labor as they considered necessary. Planners aimed to increase output as much as possible and were not concerned with shortages on the consumer market. They distributed currency based on political considerations without any need to repay it, essentially making money a free good to producers. Managers were rewarded for increasing the gross value of their output, which was calculated by adding up the costs of inputs, so they were incredibly wasteful with their resources. Inevitably, the Soviet system created enormous disproportions, some of which had serious consequences. And this is what they call the Polish disease, which is basically they would engage in production, not for the sake of production, but simply to make these quotas and to pretend like everything was going smoothly and to meet the 5-year plans, but they weren't constrained by economic reality, and they would often end up producing very, very low quality of iron and things like that, because they were just focused on getting as much of this crap out as they were without doing quality control and making sure they were actually doing a good job of things. So then the paper goes on to describe some economic stagnation during the 70s as a result of this bizarre system of production. You can see falling gross national product, still good growth rates, but a dramatic decline, a trend towards decline. And then it goes on. Communism simply failed to provide the high standard of living that it promised to ordinary people and never came close to matching the relative prosperity of the West. Per capita income in the Soviet Union peaked at just over 1/3 of United States levels, yet even this number overestimates their well-being. After all, increasing yearly output, as measured in macroeconomic statistics, does not necessarily correlate with improved conditions for the masses. This is true even for market economies, but statistics and reality were even further apart in a command system. So, don't trust the stats. The actual conditions of people are the whole point of an economic system, and that is where communism failed. And I'm going a little hoarse here. 2 hours in. We're going to cut this off.